weight loss, body composition, and mastering the art of rocking the body you've always deserved and dreamed of in midlife and beyond. Let's cut through the noise. Society tells us it's downhill from now on. We're told to embrace the middle-aged weight gain, embrace the muscle loss and poor health. If that's your vibe, then cool. But if you're ready to defy the narrative, then I am your gal. This podcast is a no fluff podcast where we break down the essential truths of body composition, toss around some practical tips, and dissect the latest trends. I'm not here to sugarcoat. I'm here to show you what's not just possible, but downright probable for you. If you enjoy this content, be sure to click the link in the show notes to explore how we can team up and kick mediocrity to the curb. I offer one-on-one coaching, my ever-popular group coaching programs, and my corporate Educate to Elevate program. Okay, let's get on with the podcast. Enjoy. Hello. It is December the 13th, and I have a couple of topics to cover today. So I am on day 5 now of coaching my Peak Week 5-day shred. And some of the questions that came up with my program members kind of inspired me to do this podcast. So first, I want to talk about insulin resistance a little bit. Like, I feel like I'm always talking about insulin resistance. I feel like I've been talking about insulin resistance for like 30 years. And I think I should check, but I think back in prior podcasts, I gave you that calculation from your blood work. I'm going to go over it again quickly. I think I've already covered it. But what came up last night, resistance, and then I want to talk about some, because we're coming up to the end of the year, I want to talk about some ideas with regards to goal setting, prioritizing events, this idea of perfection. So, but let me start with insulin resistance. So because insulin resistance, I could spend at least 6 hours on this podcast, and I'm not going to do any Joe Rogan type podcasts ever. So let me summarize it a little bit. So insulin resistance is the abundance of insulin. It's not the lack of insulin. It is the abundance of insulin. When we have insulin resistance, it's because we have a lot of it, but our body doesn't recognize that we have a lot of it. So the analogy I like to use, I have two, but imagine that you buy a house and it's under the flight path. Well, you are going to notice every time a plane goes over, it's going to seem really loud and you're going to, wow, clutch your ears. But when you've lived there a few months, you're not even going to notice it. So what we are overexposed to, we become resistant to. Say that again. What we are overexposed to, we become resistant to. And that might resonate on a lot of things in life. But with regards to insulin, when we have an abundance of insulin, we become resistant to it. We don't recognize it. We don't realize it's there. And last night in the third Zoom of the Peak Week program, I was talking about it with regards to the liver. And how when the liver becomes insulin resistant, good luck losing weight, good luck building muscle. I mean, everything starts with the liver. So what I was saying is when the liver becomes insulin resistant, it's a real problem, because what's happening is there's an abundance of insulin in the body, but the liver thinks there isn't very much at all. So you can be having an abundance of carbohydrates, you've got high blood sugar, you've got high insulin, but the liver thinks you've got low insulin. So what does the liver do? Well, the liver stores sugar and it releases sugar into circulation when needed. So in a healthy body, the liver is going to hold on to this store of sugar, glycogen, and it's going to release the sugar when needed. So when we are sleeping, in between meals, in a fasted state. So that can be confusing for some people that use their continuous blood glucose monitors and they see their blood glucose jumping around even when they're not eating. That's what's happening. The liver is releasing sugar into the blood when needed. That's also why diabetics or pre-diabetics, or even people with just insulin resistance, which is about 80% of America, then when they stop eating carbohydrates in an attempt to, lose weight or control the situation, and their blood sugar remains high. And that could be very frustrating until you realize, well, the liver doesn't realize you're not eating any carbs. It's just pumping out blood sugar because you're insulin resistant, pre-diabetic or diabetic. So I was talking about insulin resistance, and I talk a lot about liver health, and I'll do a podcast on it. I do have a video on it. If anybody wants that video, I'm happy to send you a link. Just email me at, use my personal email. So that is my name, Joanne Lee Cornish at Gmail, and I'll send you a Dropbox links for that video on liver health. It's so important. And today I'm seeing the quality of food getting worse and worse. Even the people taking the weight loss medications, and the impact on the liver is huge. Anyway, I digress. So what I was talking about with insulin resistance is that when we do our blood work, the you know the doctors might say, "Oh, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine," and then one visit, "Oh, you're pre-diabetic," and you're like, "Whoa, where did that come from?" Well, that's because fasted insulin isn't on standard blood work. So you didn't get a pre-warning. You'd get a pre-warning if you saw your fasted insulin level going up and up and up and up. But on standard blood work, you don't get that opportunity to get the forewarning. You just get like, oh, now you're pre-diabetic, now you're diabetic, and now there's doctor saying, well, you better lose weight. And well, thanks a lot, but you could have told me 15 years prior. So the calculation I'm talking about here to see if you're insulin resistant or not. And forgive me if I have done this in a prior podcast. I get confused with the podcasts that I do, but then I've got coaching calls, and then I've got my, I film my videos for my self-paced programs, and I remember talking about it, but I don't remember what I was talking about it for. So forgive me if I'm repeating myself, but what I'm talking about here is fasted insulin is not on your standard blood work. You can ask for it, and if you've got a great doctor, it will be on your standard blood work. But you have to ask for it, or you can book it yourself. You can do your own blood work through iuselifeextension.com and just order your fasted insulin. It's a $29 test. But there's also another calculation you can use today if you pull out your standard blood work. And that is, look at your triglyceride level and look at your HDL level. So your triglyceride level is telling you what your liver is doing. That's what that's doing. And that is, so the liver, sugar goes into the liver. The liver will convert the excess sugar into triglycerides, pump it out into the blood, and it'll land on your ass. I jest. But the liver will turn sugar into fat, which is triglycerides, send it out into circulation where it can be used for fuel, but it can also land in your adipose tissue stores, your fat storage, wherever your fat patterning is. So triglycerides, if you've got a lot of triglycerides, high triglycerides, it's because the liver's having to make a lot of fat. And that's absolutely indicative of your exercise and the amount of carbohydrates you're eating. Your HDL, on the other hand, is what we call the good cholesterol. And we call it the good cholesterol because it is released and it goes up and it mops up the bad cholesterol and takes it back to the liver to be recycled. So when we divide triglyceride by HDL, it gives us a number. So I'll use an example here. And the example I'll use is a lady I met. Not a client of mine, but I met, and I told her, oh, did I? No, so I'm sorry. This is a lady that wasn't one of my groups. I apologize. And her triglycerides were 135 and her HDL was 35. Now, what's happening there is anybody's going to say, well, 135, normal triglycerides are under 150. If you come and do my Mastering with Life program, I will argue that, okay, that might be normal, but optimal is under 100. But anyway, this lady is 135. So by the average range, they're saying she's good, normal. I'm saying she's not, but anyway. And then her HDL was 35. And HDL is good, so we want that as high as we can. And hers was 35. And they say the normal is like 40 to 50. Again, optimal is more like 70, but normal, if you look on your blood work range. So what they're going to say to this lady, she's got triglycerides of 135, she's got HDL of 35. They're going to say, oh, you're kind of good. You're kind of good. Yeah, you're right there. Your HDL's a bit low, have some fish oil, but are you good? She's not good because when you divide that triglycerides by the HDL, you get 3.8. Well, anything over 3 is insulin resistant. So this lady is struggling to lose weight. They're telling her her blood work's perfect. It's not. And she doesn't know what's going on. Well, to me, it's screaming at me. Her blood work is screaming at me. We just have to fix that ratio. And she'll lose weight. It's a no-brainer. And it's right in front of you on all your standard blood work, but nobody's explaining it to you. Um, and I'm not a doctor and I've got no medical experience whatsoever, and I shouldn't be the one telling you this. So then you get my blood work. So what am I haven't even done my calculation. Hold on. So my triglycerides were 55, and I divide that by my HDL, which was 90, and my ratio is 0.6. I'm good. Should be because I coach this stuff, huh? So if you do that calculation over 3, you're insulin resistant. Ideally, you want to be 1. Super ideally, you want to be under 1. If you know that number, you get forewarned. You can track, the chance of diabetes like 10 years before it happens if you do that calculation from your standard blood work. And if your number is high, if it is over 1, if it is over 3, then it's kind of a bit of sad news, but it also absolutely pinpoints what has to be fixed. And it can be fixed super easily, guys. I mean, I've brought Kevin's blood work, triglycerides, I halved it in about 6 months when he eventually started listening to me and realized what I did for a living. It took me about 10 years of marriage, but anyway. But what I was taught, so I might have told you that before in a prior podcast, but what I wanted you to know today is what are the visible signs of insulin resistance, considering so many people and so many kids have it? Belly fat is a sign of insulin resistance. High blood pressure is a given with insulin resistance. High triglycerides, again, that is your liver is making fat. Constant water retention, that's something I hear a lot, a lot, a lot, a lot. Constant water retention. Family history of type 2 diabetes, ladies with PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, then you were, gosh, ladies, you have a high insulin state. I mean, it can be very difficult for those ladies to lose weight, but the one thing, and fasting works really well for them, because it crushes insulin. But what I was talking about last night, the one sign that people aren't aware of is patches of darker skin and skin tags. So patches of darker skin and also little skin tags, especially around the neck and the armpit and anywhere you've got a crease or a fold. That's telling you insulin resistance. Why would your body produce skin tags with insulin resistance? Because again, insulin resistance is a high insulin state. And but insulin is also a growth factor. And I talk about insulin being a good guy in my Mastering Muscle program. It's a growth factor. So what insulin is doing in a high insulin state, it speeds up, because it's a growth factor, skin cells, and it can cause little excess skin patches which show up as skin tags and also dark patches of skin. So belly fat, high blood pressure, constant water retention, family history, and skin tags, and using that calculation. If that sounds familiar, if that looks familiar, if that is reading as familiar, insulin resistance, you have been forewarned. If nothing changes, you won't stay in insulin resistance. It will progress. And then pre-diabetes and diabetes. So that's that part of this podcast. Please do your calculation, arm yourself with the equipment. Sorry, arm yourself with your knowledge, with knowledge that the greatest tool you can have. And, I talk about understanding your own blood work a lot in my signature program and my Mastering with Life program. Anyway, so then I want to talk to you about today about looking towards the new year and looking towards behaviors and maybe goal setting and things like that. But I wanted to give you a little bit of good news here. So this is what I call consistency versus perfection. If you want to change your body, we have to change our brain. It's not change your body, change your brain. It's change your brain, change your body. And the brain changes very slowly. It actually really doesn't like drastic changes, which is why Peak Week is only 5 days for a start, but it is why when you try and do something radical, like that 70-day, 75 hard, or whatever it's called, but or other really radical long changes, usually you fail. And then you blame yourself. And that's because and it's not your fault. But the brain doesn't like change that quickly. It changes slowly. Um, so that's why it's the small habits that we create. It's the daily wins that we experience that over time change the brain, and then we can change the body. We can't be better than our thoughts. If you're feeling really, really bad about yourself, you're not going to suddenly get this amazing surprise and wake up looking amazing. You're not. You're not. Your body is going to mirror your brain. So your brain, again, knowledge is the greatest tool because when you understand this, your belief system changes and then your results change. But if you're just blindly following a diet or an exercise program and you're training, but you don't really know what the exercise is for, it's the results are going to be slow. So changing the brain slowly and then the body will change, not the other way around. When we seek perfection, and there's certainly certain personality types that they're so perfectionists, and sometimes we're a little envious of them, but maybe not, because what happens with perfection is they they don't get the daily wins, they get the daily fails because they've set the bar so high. And sometimes I see this martyrism with this and this, like, I'm just such a perfectionist. Well, that's great. And you're experiencing daily fails. The brain's not going to change. We have to have the daily wins, no matter how small they are. So this is where I like to talk about the error rate. The error rate, which is well studied, we have to fail to grow in anything, in anything. And the optimal error rate is 15% in anything. And it seems to work really well. And that's because, and it can even be more than that, because if you're taking on a goal and you're getting everything 100% perfect, your goal's not big enough. It's too easy. And what happens when things are too easy? We stop doing them. You know, if something's so crazy easy, I'm trying to think of a good example, you're not motivated to do it. It's too easy. If I said, I've got to walk to the end of my driveway every day. Too easy. I'm not going to do it today. Whatever. Yeah, and even if I do it, it's not doing anything for me. I don't feel motivated by it. I don't feel accomplished by it. So when you have a 100% success rate, it's too easy. Now, if you have a 50% failure rate, that's really going to do a number on your brain. Now you start doubting yourself and oh my gosh. and you keep plodding along, but it really is disheartening because you're not getting the wins. I know it becomes a flip of a coin type of thing. And now the goal that you've set is too big. You've got to break it down a little bit more. Now, I talk this a lot more about this. I do a whole 2-week program on this in my Victory Vault program, which is starting, I think it's starting January the 19th or something. I'll put the link in the show notes. I feel like I'm just plugging programs in this podcast. I'm sorry, I've just been organizing all my dates for next year. But the Victory Vault is a great program. So error rate of 15%. But it can be higher than that. But let's think about it in terms of, say, a meal plan. So say you're eating 3 meals a day and one snack. Yeah? 3 meals and one snack a day. So you're eating 28 times per week. Say that 28 meals per week. Say that you had a 15% error rate. That would mean 4 meals per week could be completely wrong. And that would still be an optimal failure rate. So I think you can see how it becomes a lot more doable when we get out of the thought of everything has to be perfect and everything has to be 100% and oh, I blew it on Friday night. I'm an idiot. Oh my gosh. Oh, I had such a tough weekend. Maybe not. 15% failure rate, 4 meals a week. Not so bad, right? And what I'm saying is that's optimal. So you can actually progress with that. You're actually progressing, changing your brain, changing your body. Now that failure rate can be higher than 15%. I mean, there's a lot of studies, one in particular, that says how a 40% failure rate worked really well. 40% failure rate. So using the same example, that would be out of 28 meals, 12 of them were perfect. Only 12, right? 40%. If I got that the right way around. But you see what I'm saying? It's like you don't have to be perfect to move forward. In fact, perfection can really be problematic. And I have mentioned this before, but there's nothing that makes me more nervous when I work with a client and they send me their exercise journal or their food log, and it is super concise and really detailed, and everything is perfectly. I'm like, it worries me because when those people crash, they crash really hard. And it can happen at this time of year. There was one great study, and they looked at these people that lost a bunch of weight, gained a bunch of muscle, and they looked at their compliance rate. And though their compliance rate was anything from 50 to 79%. 50 to 79%. And that was over a year period. A year. So what I'm saying here is when life shows up, and I've got a lady in my program now, and she was saying how this time of the year, I mean, she's doing Peak Week, which is a very structured program, and she has a lot of things going on this week. And it's just nice to know when life shows up, you do not have to be perfect, but you do have to be consistent. There's another thing I want to mention, and then I'll get off this podcast. I never like my podcast to be too long. And that is a tool that I use every day. And again, I'm going to be talking about it in the Victory Vault. And that is to-do lists. As I am talking to you now, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 post-it notes in front of me. I also have a little yellow book, which I'm looking at, which has got lists and lists and lists of to-do lists, right? Lists. And that's okay. To-do lists are great. They're to remind me of things I need to do. But also next to me, I have another post-it note, and that is my success list. So what I mean, I write it every night. My success lists are what I need to do today. The rest are to-do lists. They all need to be done. But what do I need to do today? The three most important, in today's case, it's three. It's never more than five. Do I need to do today to be a success? Um, To-do lists are long. Success lists are very short. And anything can be on the success list. I mean, one of my things on my success list is I need to phone the pharmacy. I need to get my hormones renewed because I leave the country on Tuesday. That needs to be done because I do not want to go to England for a couple of weeks without, that. That needs to be done. Um, Doing a podcast was actually on my success list, and here I am doing it 19 in the morning. And I've got another thing to do with another project that's on the to-do list, on my success list. But this is what I'm talking about the daily wins. If I'm looking at my to-do list, I'm just wallowing. I'm just drowning, and it's always getting longer. It's never getting shorter. And I'm doing the easy things on the to-do list, and I don't get that feeling of a daily win. When I hit my success list, it's that internal daily win that just changes the mind, changes your mind, changes how you view yourself. And when you view yourself differently, everything changes. Yes, I am a body composition coach, but maybe other things you have going on in your personal life, in your work life, everything shifts when you have daily wins, and that's how you start viewing yourself, and that's how you start occurring in the world. I'll leave it at that today. A little bit on insulin resistance. Gosh, I could talk forever about that. A little bit about consistency versus perfection, which is kind of, I thought, time appropriate in the holiday seasons. And maybe a little tool you might like to use, to-do list versus success list. I do that all the time. And again, if you like that sort of stuff and the mindset and we talk goal setting and principles and standards, that's coming up in my Victory Vault program, which I only ran once last year. I did it last January, and that is coming up this January. All my programs for 2025 are going to be posted on my website, theshrinkshop.com. Coming up at the beginning of the year, I am going to do Peak Week again. So I am going to do Peak Week. I never do it back to back, but I feel like I can't start the year without doing Peak Week first. So I'm going to do Peak Week again. That is going to start the Peak Week 5-day shred. That is going to start on January the 12th, I believe it is, because I never do anything the first 2 weeks of January. Nobody's ready. They think they're ready and they're not. So January the 12th for a week. Immediately after that, I'm going to do the 2-week Victory Vault program, which is epic to start the year with that program. But there's homework involved. There's a lot of self-assessment. It's not just me coaching the program. You have to be very involved in that. That's a 2-week program. And then after that, I'm going to do protein power. So I'm going to do a 14-day protein challenge, which I've never done before, but it will set everybody up really well for the other programs. All that's going to be posted on my website. Obviously, I'll remind you in the podcast. But have a great day. If you're traveling, have fun. And I hope today was useful.